And welcome to Talks of Outkasts, where we dive into the deep waters of faith, the Bible, life as a Christian, and the journey of ministry. We are two preachers of the gospel located somewhere in some such. I'm Chris, and he's Miles, and here we go. Miles, how was your weekend?
It was good. I got to see my good old buddy Chris. Got to get me some mango with chamoy on it, so that was exciting.
How is that, by the way?
It's actually pretty good. I probably should have ate it when I bought it, but
Yeah. So you got to enjoy some Tex-Mex and some authentic Texas barbecue. We had some Cajun.
Yep. It was exciting because it's well, you got to do all three. You got to hit three of my favorite things, bro. So it was good.
Yep. Had those crawfish but it's interesting because it's not really crawfish season yet. I mean, I guess we're just on the very front end of it. So they were really small and very, very spicy. Well, they were spicy for children, but not for me. So
spicy for children, and some people just have to eat chicken strips. So
Yes, that's right. That's right.
The viewers.
And this guy's this guy's got all these options. There's like gator and etouffee and gumbo and crawfish, and I'll just have the chicken strips.
He's like, hey, I'll just take the chicken.
Make sure it's Cajun chicken, though.
Hey, I got the Cajun fries, which is just French fries with Cajun stuff
with cheese on it. Yeah. So
well,
that was fun.
Cody, we love you. So we're gonna move on though. So I really don't have a whole lot but I do have a question. I was thinking the other day of, there are lots of people that and just let me do a preface. Me and Chris are not good at this, so that's why I want to ask it, because I feel like we can give advice most of the time, and then we just aren't good at doing it ourselves. Is that fair?
I mean, it depends on what it is, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's true. Well, for me then, this will be a Miles thing. How do you approach having conversations you don't want to have? Like, yeah, see, that's what I knew. And maybe we can start off. I don't know if spirituals are right where, I guess so. I was just thinking, because you have, like in my stage, I have couples who maybe one feels like they're called to ministry of some kind. And they don't know how to break it to the other one, or they're afraid that the other, like the spouse, I mean, they're boyfriend and girlfriend yet, they're not married. So we'll just use the word spouse for a better, easier thing. But they're afraid that if they break this conversation, then maybe the person's going to break up with them or leave them. I mean, how would you suggest having this conversation with someone?
Well, I mean, that one I feel like is relatively simple. You just have it and just get it out of the way. I mean, but you have to decide, how committed you are to following God's call in your life. I mean, it really just kind of comes down to that, doesn't it? That and I was fortunate from the standpoint that I knew when I was 16 that I wanted to be a preacher. And so, really filtering everything, I was able to make a lot of those decisions early on, kind of with that as my filter. And so that affected the girls that I dated. It affected where I went to school, what I majored in. I mean, everything was just, I saw everything as sort of through that filter. And so, I didn't have to really wrestle with some of those things later on. And, whereas if I'd pursued a career or something like that and God had called me when I was 30, that would have been probably a much more difficult conversation, because, you're going into a relationship that's already established under sort of one set of parameters. And now you're changing the parameters, pretty radically. And so that's a much different kind of conversation. Not to mention the fact that, if you tell your spouse I think I'm called into ministry and your spouse just isn't gonna have it, what do you do then?
Mm,
Um, my advice to someone who is in that position would be, that you don't pursue vocational ministry unless your spouse is on board, because it's not a job like other jobs. And I know we've talked about that a lot, and I think people sometimes roll their eyes when ministers say things like that, but it's the truth. I was talking with somebody today about that very thing. When you bring somebody on part time, to fill a part time position at the church, you're asking them, for say 10 hours a week. You're going to pay them, let's say, $300 a week for 10 hours a week. But the reality is that they're not going to spend 10 hours a week on that if they're really called to it. It's always going to be on their mind. It's going to be on their thoughts. It's just not the kind of thing that you can just lay down at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and go home and forget about. At least it's not for me. And you can be present with your wife, and you can be present. We talk about that a lot, being present with your family, and you can do that. But that thought of, your ministry and how things are going, and what you might want to do or where you need to go, is always, for me, always just seconds away from being in the forefront of my mind.
mm.
And I don't know, I don't I'm sure there are, and I'm sure if there were people on here with us that maybe pursued other vocations and did other things. I'm certain that we're, as ministers, we're not the only ones that experience that.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
just think surely we're not. But I do think with a lot of other professions, it's just easier to set it down at the end of the day and pick it up again the next morning when you go back to work. I don't want to forget that topic, but here's another interesting question. What other vocation would you compare ministry to? So in other words, being in ministry is a lot like blank.
That's a
So
good
so while you're think
mm.
Yeah, so
Go
so
no,
so
no,
while
you go
you're
ahead.
thinking, I would suggest probably two that I think probably come the closest, to expectation and time, and just the grind of it. One would be, I think, coaching. I find that when I'm talking to coaches, whether they're Christians or not, I find there's a lot of similarities, with what we do versus coaching a team and trying to get a team to buy in and create
Mm,
a culture and all those kind of things. So I think coaching is one, and I think the other one is honestly probably farming and ranching.
mm,
Because if you own a farm or a ranch, and I'll say this, and this is a lot that I learned when I was up there in your neck of the woods. You're never really away from it. You can take, a vacation, but you're checking in. You want to know that, the chores are getting done, the cows haven't gotten out of the fence, and if they did you get them back? And um, those are the two that I think are probably the closest.
yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think maybe one, and I would probably say if you're a good one, would be some kind of counselor or psychologist, um, and that's both Christian and not, because you're still dealing with the human, just the human depravity that we see in the church, and then how do you approach it? Now, of course, we're coming from the scriptures, right? So we're trying to address it from that angle and that side, because that's what we hold to and what we know to be true. So, but and then when I think about that, I think about the other side, the secular side of counseling. It has to be very difficult because you're trying to help people cope in their own self, right? Like we're
Right.
teaching people that we need Jesus, and our coping is giving it to Jesus. And I know that's easy to say right now in this moment, but that's really what we're doing, and handing everything to Christ and walking with them through Christ. And then I could, because I feel like in the secular side of counseling is, what Susie told me is gonna carry. I'm gonna carry that, you know, because I feel like you're just worried about Susie, and then you're worried about a plethora of people, and so you're always carrying around their baggage unintentionally, right? Like the same.
Right.
I would say
Yeah.
the same for us is I mean, it's like a lot of times I feel like the guys at the airport, there's just another thing coming, like a baggage thing. There's just always more and more. Sometimes it's mine and sometimes it's, it's someone else's. And it's not that that's I don't want to make it sound like that's a thing that I don't want to do, but it is something that we do. Like we can't let go of that. We as much as we want to shut down from that, but we still care about your family. We still care about your marriages. We still care about situations that you're in, whether the losses you had. I mean, our job literally, God has called us to love and shepherd you. And I mean, you can't, no matter what you do. And I think a lot of guys in ministry are having a hard time because they're trying to shut it off. And I'm like, there is no off. It's just
Right.
it's just learning how to trust God in it and be still and let him do the directing. But yeah, could see that in the farming and ranching because if you don't have rain, you got, and then when that's over with, you got to hope you got enough bushels or whatever else. And then, I mean, yeah, there's just so much that goes into it and it's just never ending. It's just a constant, flow. You might have a little downtime, but the rest is you're right back to it. So yeah, that's a good combo.
Right.
And do you think, I would probably say maybe a little bit of doctors and nurses, maybe, I mean, maybe more, I don't know, just depending, but I would say if we're comparing it, they would also have to be good, like care enough about it to be, you know what I mean? And that'd be the same in
Right.
preaching. I mean, you gotta care enough and be sympathetic to that. So
Yeah. And go ahead.
no, you're good. I was gonna segue back. So go ahead. What you're
Well,
saying.
I was just going to add, you said something that made me think of something else, and that is that, if you love your people, it never really goes away, right? I
Mm,
mean, and then and not to mention, and this is what I do think sets ministry apart is that if you're doing it right, you're constantly in the word. And so not only is everything you said true, but also what is true is that you're constantly battling your own
yeah,
impulses and your own nature and your own hypocrisy.
yeah.
I had something like that hit me this weekend. When I was thinking about a situation here and I was thinking about a particular individual here, and all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, I was reading early Saturday morning, and the Lord just dealt with me from His Word. And what He dealt with me on was, you're called to love these people, and loving them means that you love them regardless of whether or not they validate you in some way. And
Mm,
so, even if they're difficult to deal with, or even if they don't validate you at all, or even if they make you feel stupid and undermined in the whole gamut, you're still called to love them and to and to be kind and to be gentle, and if you're looking for what you get out of it, then you're not really loving them. What you're loving
mm,
is what they give you, or you're loving what they do for you, but you're not really loving them. And so that was just an experience, just here recently in my own heart, dealing with it. And so, yeah, it certainly makes it difficult. But yeah, so back to difficult conversations, Miles. What and I'll say this about difficult conversations, if I can interject. They don't get better if you put them off.
no,
If it's a conversation that has to happen, and that's the thing too, is that sometimes we misread the situation and we think a conversation has to happen when it doesn't really have to happen,
mm,
or we think a conversation doesn't need to happen when it really does. And so sometimes even trying to figure out whether or not a conversation needs to take place can be really difficult.
sure, sure. But would you err on the side of let's have the conversation than not? I mean, I, so what I tend to find is that a lot of times is it's the conversations we should have had that we just like, nah, it'll be okay. And then it festers, right? It's just like, um, cutting your hand and you never clean it, right? In the beginning, had you just cleaned it and put a band-aid on it instead of kept, doing whatever it is you're doing, and then it just all of a sudden it starts to hurt more and it starts to fester, and then next thing you know, your finger's infected. So
Yeah.
would you I mean, I know what you mean because I do know there's like sometimes it's just your social cue. You're like, okay, I don't need to, like, this is just me reading into the situation wrong, right? But I guess, would you err more on the side of having the conversation and helping learning when not to say something rather than the other, festering and those
So
type of things?
yeah, so I have to give a shout out to two members of my team down here, Jacob and Macy. We were talking about a particular situation, and their counsel was, look, if this is something that's going to fester with you, I mean, if this is something that's going to eat at you, then it's probably better to go ahead and have the conversation. But if it's something that you can get over, if it's something that you
Mm,
can deal with, then deal with it and let it go and trust the Lord to take care of it. And that was, for the situation that I was dealing with at the time, that was very good and very wise advice. And I know both of them listened to the podcast, and so little shout out there for Jacob and Macy and their wisdom and how the Lord used them in my own heart and in my own life. And so, but I do think that's a pretty good
mm.
measuring stick, don't you think?
Yeah,
If you say, well, I can get past this and it's not going to bother me. Well, then, yeah, bear with one another, bear with one another's weaknesses, and wait for the Lord to do it. But if it is something that's going to eat at you, you probably should have the conversation.
yeah, I think that's good.
If it if for no other reason, because in having the conversation, you might discover that you did misread it,
Mm,
and what you thought was intended really wasn't intended at all. And and then you have peace and you have closure, and you've hopefully strengthened a relationship with somebody.
sure, sure. Would you say, like, if we just think about through church discipline and things like that, that sometimes you could head off something that may have needed disciplined if you kind of just talk about it. Some of it, I know what you're saying. Like, let's say we've discerned, right? We've said, okay, God, this is an issue for me. Like, I am to a place to where I've tried to let it go and I can't. You just keep, it's the festering, right? You know it's going to fest, or it is. But sometimes I feel like if we would just talk through these things, like I could, I don't know how to say this. I can think about people in my life that I've watched do dumb things. And there's been a couple times where I probably should have said something. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and I know that's a learning thing, but also, I mean, I think that that idea of fear and rejection in the Christian world is in not just in evangelism, it's in everything. Like, you're
Right.
afraid that if you're afraid if you confront a brother or sister, I mean, we like to think we live in this perfect world where we could do that, and they're just gonna, oh, thanks, bruh. I really love that
Yeah.
you said that about me, but
Right.
it doesn't work that way. And so, man, sometimes I just wonder if we would just talk more about it, if that could change, some things. I don't know. I just
Yeah,
was
no,
kind of
but
thinking that through.
I think that's legitimate. I think that's a legitimate concern that a lot of people have. I mean, if you haven't experienced it by now, you're going to, that you will have leadership that will tell you, yes, I agree that something needs to be done, or yes, I agree that something needs to be said, but I just want to stay out of it, or I just don't want to get involved in it. Well, maybe you don't need to be in leadership then.
Mm,
If you'll let someone just go and be hung just because you don't want to quote be involved,
mm,
um that's a real problem. And like I said, if you haven't dealt with that, and Miles, I know that to some degree you have,
mm,
then I think that that is put that's almost more heartbreaking than the offense. I mean, that's almost more heartbreaking than, whatever the issue is that somebody might be dealing with or somebody might be going through. But I also want to say this about having hard conversations. You have to watch your own heart in it,
mm,
because if your heart is, um I want to punish, or I want to embarrass or shame or make them feel bad, or anything along those lines, then I would tell you don't have the conversation. And that goes back to Galatians 6 verses
mm,
1 through 4, where Paul says, now there
yeah,
he's talking about sin, But
Sure.
I think it
Sure.
also applies to hard conversations where he says, "You who are spiritual, restore this brother in a spirit of gentleness."
Mm.
And then he says, "Keep watch on yourselves, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each will have to bear his own load." So I think one of the things that needs to happen that oftentimes doesn't happen, because there are people who don't mind being confrontational. I mean, I've known people in churches that I served who almost weren't happy unless somebody was mad about something. And they just kind of fed off, problems. And if there weren't really any problems, they'd make them up.
Yeah.
And so I think not enough is said about, look, if you're going to enter into this kind of a conversation, you've got to make sure that your heart is right. You've got to make sure that your motive is not, "Hey, this person ticked me off," or "This person made me feel a certain way that was negative," or but that your heart's motive is, "I love this person. They are hurting themselves and they're hurting other people, and I want to try and help them stop."
Mm.
That's the only motive that you can have, and people know. I mean, if you go into a conversation and you just go in, both guns blazing,
Yeah.
to use the familiar colloquialism, then people know that, and that's when you've lost a friend. I mean, and that's a guaranteed, fracture of a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think one thing we need to remember is, sometimes you need to go get some air, before you come and deal with the issue. I mean, it's like I've learned that ministry is just like dealing with my kids. Like when they break the rule or whatever, or something gone wrong, there's a difference when dad acts out of reaction than when I go and cool down about it and then try to approach it in a meaning. You know what I mean? I think sometimes there is a need for that immediate reaction, right? When sticking a fork in the plug-in thing, I use that illustration all the time. Well, yeah, that's an instant thing where I'm like, hey, don't be doing that. Don't do that. But then there's a time where, Cooper's lied to me about his homework or something more, maybe even more, a little more major than that. And I can act instantly out of my sinful and prideful self, or I can go downstairs, take a breath, realize that I've done the same thing. I've lied, I lied to my mom about way worse things than those things. And she didn't just come in and eat my brains out. She came in and loved me. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it was discipline, but it was in a different heart. It wasn't in an anger. It wasn't in that way. And I think the same can be true when we're in the church. And this is not just for leadership. This is in everybody, because half the things that we deal with as leadership is the sheep fighting the sheep. It's not, you know
Right.
what I mean? I mean, and so it's just like, okay, well, maybe we should just take a breath, let's simmer down. Is it really that big a deal that the carpet's red? Or I know that's
Right.
silly, but you know what I'm
Or
saying?
green.
Or green or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I don't want that anyways. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
is like, hey, just settle down. I mean, I think too many times, let me ask you this. We're just gonna go all over the place with this little deal here. Is this a lack? Let me be careful. Now I'll be careful, but in the same way I won't. Is this Can this be also chalked up to also biblical illiteracy? Like not maybe not even illiteracy, just the fact that we don't know it. Um, is like because you read Ephesians 4:32, be kind and compassionate to everyone, forgiving each other as Christ Jesus forgave you. Galatians, bearing one another burdens. Ephesians 4, edifying the body. I mean, all throughout the New Testament, it's just a constant reminder that we are to be building each other up. And sometimes I wonder, I know sin gets in the way, right? Our hearts are wicked. I understand that. But sometimes I just wonder, like, do we even know the scriptures? Like when we think about the church, do we even know the scriptures? Or are we just so chalked up to doing what we want to do in the church that we're missing it? You know what I mean? We're missing why we're really here, because it's more than choir. It's more than playing the piano. It's more than if the door greeting's your thing. Whatever it is, it's more than that. It's the fact that you and I, both of our lives are probably not good, at least in the sin point, and we need Jesus together. And instead of us butting heads with each other, it's like I I don't know. I just think this way through. And sometimes I was like, if we could have more conversations and maybe even true confession of sin with each other. I mean, I know within reason, right? I'm not going to confess. You make this joke. Well, it's not really a joke. It's very serious, but it's kind of funny. You're not going to, yeah. Anyways, we won't say that. I don't know if that's appropriate for here. Uh, but there are
I've never
certain
said
things.
anything inappropriate.
That's right. So I guess it would be fine, but um,
I think it really comes down to several different things, Miles. I think biblical illiteracy, I think, is certainly part of it. I think we read, but it's not just that we don't understand what the or that we don't know what the Bible says, is that we haven't really thought through what it really means. And so in the passages that you quoted, the one from Ephesians 4 about being compassionate toward one another and forgiving one another, like, we have this idea that forgiveness means that there's no consequences. I mean, you
mm,
you you can
mm,
still lovingly deal with someone's sin even though you have forgiven them.
mm,
And so I think the biblical illiteracy is part of it, and I think another part of it is, quite honestly, we really just don't love each other.
mm,
Because you mentioned, your children. If you see your children doing something that, as an adult, if that doesn't get corrected, that's going to
mm,
cause you a lot of pain down the road. And so let's just take lying, because that was one that you mentioned. Okay, so you notice your 6-year old is lying. Well, as an adult, you should be able to figure out, if my son or my daughter doesn't figure out that lying's not a good idea, that's going to cause them a lot of issues later on in their life. That's going to cause them relationships. It could cost them jobs. It could cost them, it can cost them all sorts of things, their reputation, I mean, everything. And so, if you love your child, and you notice that they've started kind of doing this, that if they don't get it corrected, it's going to be a really, really bad thing for them later on. Well, then of course you're going to correct them, because you love them, not because you're mad at them, because although you may be angry because they lie, or because they whatever it is that they do, but your ultimate motive is you love them, and you don't want them to fracture relationships because they can't tell the truth, and you don't want them to lose jobs, and you don't want them to miss opportunities, and to have a poorer life because they
mm.
couldn't get this thing under control. And so with your kids, you'll correct them, but
Yeah.
for some reason, when it comes to people outside of our family, and sometimes even within families, we think, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Well then, you don't really love that person, do you?
Mm,
If you're not willing to sit down with someone and say, look, there's a lot of things that you do really well, but this thing over here, man, you've really got to fix this, because I'm not sure you're aware of it, but this is really hurting you. And if you don't fix
yeah.
it, it's going to hurt you even more. Well, that would be the loving thing to do, would it not?
Yeah.
And so and
Absolutely.
so and so
Yeah.
my argument is that we really don't love each other well. And so I think that's part of it also,
Yeah. I
which
was
I
just
guess
gonna
would
say,
still fall under biblical illiteracy, but yeah.
sure, sure. But I also just think we have this construed idea what love is. I mean,
Oh, definitely.
love is doing the best that we can possibly do for someone else.
Right.
Like literally the best we could possibly do. And that is saying things that are hard. That is, admitting when you're wrong. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, right? You talk about it all the time. One thing I've always appreciated about you is that when you're wrong, you will tell the person you're wrong. And in my world, that's a sign of weakness, right? You
Right.
don't admit that you're wrong, even if you're wrong. I mean, I love my stepdad to death, but that's just the way he was, and so,
Right.
it was just kind of the way you did things, and, I've had to man, I've had to have hard conversations with a 12-year-old, of saying, "Hey, I was wrong." And I know right now it seems kinda silly that your dad is, because my son right now, he still loves me, so forgiveness is easy for him. "Oh, it's okay, dad." But
Right.
there's gonna come a day that if I don't do this now, like, if I don't find the way to say it now, when he's 30, he's not gonna be, "It's okay, dad." He's gonna not want to do
Right.
anything with me. I mean, it's gonna
Right.
change how he is, and if our own family will do that, well, then how much more is in the church if we're not willing to say, "Hey, I missed it." I've gotta own this. I've gotta say that, "Hey, I'm not in the right place," or, whatever else, and truly, we need to seek forgiveness and love. It's like you said, I just think that if we could just do that really and break down, it would be nice if we could just break down the idea that, we can all talk about our sin, and not
Yeah.
let me be ca yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to interject just a couple of thoughts based on what you said. One, we don't really understand what the biblical idea of love is because we've been influenced by Valentine's Day and we've been influenced by rom-coms and we've been influenced by, pop culture and so when we say love, we're talking about a very specific kind of romantic or warm fuzzy feeling toward one another when in reality in the New Testament, you go back and you read 1 Corinthians 13 and you read how Paul describes love, it's not it has nothing to do with the way that you feel. It has everything
Mhm,
to do with a decision of the will, like you will to love them. Love is patient. Well, what's the point of it being patient if your patience isn't tested? I mean, those words have no meaning unless you're dealing with somebody who just irritates you. And so if you love them, then you will be patient toward them. And that's a that's an issue of the will. It's not an issue of what you feel toward them because what you feel is irritated. But yet you are patient toward them. So that's one issue. And then I think another one is, and this probably isn't going to surprise you in the least because you know me, is that we don't think through enough the implications of the gospel and how the
mhm,
gospel instructs us in these kinds of moments. So, for example, to go back to the original question of having difficult conversations and confronting and those kinds of things, there's no question that God loves us perfectly, but yet He doesn't let us go in our sin. He convicts us. He interrupts our lives. I mean, He does things to bring us out of that and yet he loves us. And then you were talking about the issue of rejection, or if I have this conversation, then or telling or just owning the fact that you missed it, owning the fact that you were wrong, and you just say, you know what, you're right.
yeah,
I got to work on that. And
yeah,
well, but where the gospel comes into play is that if the creator of the universe has put his seal of approval on you, and the Son of God Himself intercedes for you, as First John tells us, He's our advocate, and the Holy
yeah,
Spirit Himself prays for us. Well, then, in a very real way, what does it matter what anybody else thinks about you? And
mm,
so,
yeah,
if what Jesus says about you is more true than what people say about you, then owning your mistakes is all of a sudden going to become something that's really not that big of a deal. Okay, so they
mhm,
think I'm weak. So what? I mean, Jesus said, and the New Testament is clear that God's grace is made sufficient in our weakness, and the way to be strong is to be weak. And
yeah,
so, that's another issue I think to this is that we don't really think through the most fundamental thing and the most
mhm.
fundamental things about us and their implications for our daily lives.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's why you and I would say that the need to preach the gospel to yourself every day is so important. Is so that we
Absolutely.
can is so that we can remind ourselves every day that without Jesus saving us, I mean, where would we be? I mean, well, we know where we would be. We'd be dead in our sins and trespasses, and just to remember that, and then to come to someone else and remembering that you were just as dead as they were, or they are, right? I mean, we know people that are unbelievers that we don't want to have hard conversations with. I might come from a long line of addicts. I mean, we don't want to have this conversation every weekend, every day, but we do because we care enough about them because we don't want them to be in there. We know that
Right.
life is so much better without these things. And then as a Christian, kind of what I was preaching at your church is that we have someone so much far more better through the gospel. And so if it's the same thing as if I'm wanting my nephew or cousin to stop doing meth or whatever because it's killing them. The same thing as in the gospel is this life you're living is killing you, and you need Jesus just like I needed Jesus. And I
Right.
think if
Sure.
you're absolutely right. If we could just get to a place where we let the gospel saturate all that we are, man, it would change so much. I don't, you know what I mean? And I know in my own life it took me a long time to get there. So I got to be, you have to be fair,
Yeah.
or at least for me. I mean, there are days that, just like you said, is you'll be sitting there and then God will remind you very quickly of of your own shortcomings, that you are not above sin yourself, and those types of things. So I think that's good. That's good.
And I think there's something else here that would be kind of a minor sidetrack for us to take, as we're thinking about the gospel and all of that. The reason that we do this, the reason that we do have these kinds of difficult conversations with people is not let's just assume that we're talking about someone who we think is a brother in Christ or a sister in Christ. Well, the reality is that all of their sins have been forgiven. I mean, again, the New
Mm.
Testament is clear on that. And it's not just the sins they committed before they became a Christian, but it's all of their sins. And so the reason that you exhort them to stop sinning is because sinning still has horizontal consequences. Galatians
Yeah.
is clear that you reap what you sow. Now, the Father's love is eternal and you're eternally secure in Christ. I believe that. But that doesn't mean that your sin won't have horizontal consequences to it. Even if the vertical consequences have been dealt with by Christ and have been dealt with by the cross. If I go home tonight and lose my temper with my wife and I sin in my anger, I sin in my speech toward her, well, that sin has already been forgiven. But now I've hurt my relationship with my wife. And so there are horizontal consequences that I have to deal with. And so the reason for the Christian to stop sinning outside of the fact that it doesn't bring honor and glory to God. The other reason is because in sinning, you're hurting yourself and you're hurting the people that you love. And so, um, knock that off, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's good.
Yeah.
Look at us, Brad.
Look
All
at
right,
us.
Dan.
We came in, well, what are we
So
going to talk about? And then 38
yeah,
minutes later, here we are.
that's right. So let's segue back into the conversation of hard questions. Now let's go ahead. I mean, I know that in the beginning, if we're not married, we should be having these conversations. Because if someone is not on board with ministry, there's a lot to talk about. Like, God, is this who you have for me? I mean, you should be asking yourself in these questions with dating, anyways. Is this who you have for me? Do they share the same things as I do? Because you and I both know people who have gotten in the ministry and their wives not be on board. And they went ahead and did ministry anyways, and it has turned out awful. Like, I'm not saying all of them are that way. But the ones I know did not turn out well.
Right.
Because ministry is demanding and all those different things that come along with it. But let's fast forward because I was 25, 26. I think I was 26. I mean, now just full disclosure, um, I was a believer, not a good one. Abby was not at the time. We'd already had a son, you know. But I remember when I was in youth, feeling like God was calling me to some kind of ministry. But of course, I had better plans for my life, until I didn't. Fast forward, Cooper's 4 years old. We're submitting to Jesus, and Abby's gotten has met Jesus, and all those things, and now we're to the point to where, man, I feel God is calling me into the ministry. How do you have? I did it wrong. I just went up front and didn't tell my wife. That was a joy. Um, so if anything else, I am a what not to do. But uh, how? I mean, because these are now because things are different, right? Things are, I don't think Abby ever could imagined, 10 years ago where we're facing, getting ready to face a church full of people asking us questions of why we think God is calling us to be, maybe the pastor of this church and the pastor's wife. And so how do you do those things? I mean, if I was to give any man an advice is tell your wife,
Yeah, that's good
be,
advice.
yes, don't do what I do and surprise her from the pulpit because it never works good. It never goes over well. But what would you say? Because this is a hard question now because you have kids like my brother's moving to Africa, Liberia in a few months, like 3 months, and he's got a wife and kid, and she's 7 and 8, or maybe 8 now. And so what would you, because this would be every job. Like if I'm moving to Chicago to sell paper, or whatever, the job is moving me. We have a lot to talk about. So how do you, man, how would you say these things? Because I know me and you have talked about when it's time to leave your ministry, right? And I've talked to other guys in ministry, and one of the things that I always or that I hear a lot is that your wife will know as well. Like God helps move those things along. But what do you do when you haven't learned that yet with your wife? You know what I mean? You're in the beginning stages of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I really buy that in the first place. This is a hard conversation for me because on the one hand, probably the biggest mistakes that I've made in ministry, and certainly they would be up there, would be when we moved when my wife wasn't really on board with moving. And so I can tell you from personal experience, if you're going to do that, you'd better be absolutely certain that this is the Lord moving you and not you're trying to get out of some place that's uncomfortable or we were in church number 3, and things were hard, and I had followed the guy that had started the church, and he was completely different than me, completely different kind of personality, different kind of preacher, approached things differently, thought differently, and that was a very difficult, to use my good friend Jacob's word, that was a very difficult season of ministry. And I wanted out. I was frustrated with it. Didn't really see any kind of a real way forward there. Felt like we had crossed some lines that we couldn't walk back. You know what I mean? But my
Mhm.
wife felt differently, and she didn't want to move, and I pretty well pulled the, well, we're going card, and it was a disaster. I mean, we went to, a great church in a beautiful area, and, she to her credit, she really tried to make the best of it, but, it was obvious to her, it was obvious to me, it was obvious to the church that she wasn't really happy being there. And so that was disastrous. On the other hand, when we went to not this church, but the church before this one, initially, Carol had a lot of questions, and she now we were in a different place. Our marriage was stronger. Um, Things were better between the two of us, and so we weren't in the same exact situation that we were in when we were younger, but she had some things that she wanted, and the place that we went to didn't really check all of her boxes. But I was absolutely convinced that this is where the Lord was moving us, and we went. And after a pretty difficult first 6 months, things got a lot better, and we saw the Lord do great things. And we had a great ministry there, made some wonderful friends. My wife really loved it, even though she never really felt like it was the place that she was going to be permanently, but she really grew to love that church, love that community, and love those and love those people. And so, I don't know that there are hard, fast rules that you can apply, and that's why I say,
Sure.
for the guys who say, well, my wife is always right on these things. Well, look, I mean, nobody's omniscient, and we all love our wives. I love my
Mm,
wife. You love your wife, but our wives are not always obedient to God. I mean, that's true. I mean,
mm.
they're sinners. Well, not mine, but yours. But
That's
um,
right. That's right.
that's right. Um, and so I I I just think you got to stay away from saying it's always this or it's never that,
Sure.
because I don't think you can say that. But I do think you can say, um, you need to listen to your wife, and you need to seriously consider her thoughts and her opinions, and which means that um, she may convince you, and it may mean that she doesn't convince you. I mean, we had another time where we were looking for a ministry change, and it was before we went to our last church. And there was a church in Central Texas that I was really interested in, wanted to go, but they just couldn't pay us enough money, and it meant taking a huge pay cut. And me, it's all about the adventure, bro. And I was like, man, let's go, man. Lord will take care of it. It'll be fine. And my wife sat me down and she said, it would be financially irresponsible of you to do this. That this is not a matter of you being hungry for more money, or you being greedy, or you being motivated by money. This is a matter of reality, that you have a family, and you can't support the family on what they're going to pay. And so you can't do this. And I think if I'd have put my foot down, I think she would have gone. I don't know. But I didn't like hearing that. But you know, kind of go away, think on it, chew on it myself, and come to the realization that, I may not like that she's right, but she's right. And so that was one where I wanted to go and she didn't. And so and we didn't go because, she was right and I was wrong. So I just don't know that you can say, it's always this or it's always that. I mean, I almost think you have to take um individual things into consideration. Now that's talking about making a move once you're in ministry. If we're talking
Mhm.
about a move like I'm a teacher, but I think God's calling me into ministry, that's a different kind of conversation, because there the demands on the preacher's wife are big. And the demands on any staff member's wife or any staff member's spouse are big. And so if you have a spouse that's not really on board, you have to figure out, well, why is it that you're not on board? Is it that you think that maybe I'm not ready for this? Is it that you think that you're not ready for this? And so I think that's a much different kind of conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I think one of those things where like if I think one of the practices that I wish I could be better at or hoping to be is being able to sit down and just pray with my wife and just talk with her about things. Because I feel like some of the headaches I've had would have been negated had she just known, like, how, or if I would have known how her heart was, or where she could have known where my heart was in it. And just being able to be able to pour, because it's the same thing as it would be in the church. And I kind of had this conversation with her the other day, and she said something to me. If you're willing to pour yourself out for these people, well, you are also shepherding me. And so, there are times when I need you to pour yourself out for me, and I don't deserve the end of the cup. I don't deserve the last of you. And the same is for her, right? I would expect the same. Like, she's taking care of the kids. She has a full-time job. She's in the people world just like I am. And so And I think sometimes if we could just learn to pray with each other and talk through these things better, that we would come to that place where when we do have to have these conversations. And I think this is before ministry, in ministry, wherever you are in your life wise, is to have just already set in motion these ideas of, okay, we're both teachers. We're going to trust in God to take us where we need to go. Even if that's, let's move districts or, whatever, any position, right, that you're going to move, or you have those things, or whatever. And I think if you just start in those simple things, not simple, they're not simple. I'm not going to lie. You're both tired. It's been a rough day. What you're decompressing, how you decompress, but still, you need to try to set those things aside, because I feel like, man, and this goes along with having those difficult conversations. It's easier to have a difficult conversation with someone that loves you unconditionally as much as they possibly can, and that should be our spouse.
I agree.
And it should be someone. Um, and if I'm honest, I'm not good at it. So this is for me too. I mean, we gotta remind ourselves that they're struggling with something too, and we need each other. God gave us each other, for a purpose and reason and plan. And sometimes I think it would just help our marriages in general if we were just willing to sit and listen and pray with each other. Um, and the more we do that, I feel like just the more and more God would show us our wickedness and show us our goodness and our righteousness in Him, and how we've grown with Him and how we've changed, and how our marriage, or how our kids, and just so many things I think can come from that, if it's somewhere that we could find ourselves in, and just thinking through these hard conversations. And the same is, because I've learned in the church, it's easier to have a conversation with someone you love. It's easier to have that conversation when they trust you enough to listen. They may not like what you're saying, and it may take them, like you said earlier, a time to go kick a rock outside, like you're talking about when Carol told you what she told you.
Right.
But there's that sense of coming back, and so I just was curious in that, because this is a major point in a college person's life. But then also, I mean, we had someone in our church that was older and now going to law school, and I mean, God has completely changed the trajectory of his life, or where he was to where he is now. And I'm sure we've met other people. You can think of other people in your life that God has done that to. And man, I think these are just sometimes, just maybe we don't think about these conversations, and those types of things. Because I can't imagine. Well, I can't imagine. We had Christmas here, and my little brother told my mom and dad what he was going to do. Like, I'd already called it, because I just, you can just see from a distance God doing things, and so that was a hard conversation. My parents are not
Right.
doing well health wise, and we're sitting here, and it's Christmas, and what a time to tell somebody some things. Here's some, hey, here's some fruitcake. Oh, by the way, we're leaving, and we're leaving in 2 months. But it was
Yeah.
in watching him. But but on the other side of that, I watched my mom listen, and she has to have just as much faith in God as he did telling her, because everything is not going to be the same. My mom
Right.
is in the age now where 2 years is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It's not like it used to be. And so remembering that as well when you're having these conversations is the other side of what and that's just, man, that's just a lot of it's been on my heart lately. Just trying to think through, because I've had to have a lot of hard conversations over the last couple months. And so,
Sure.
um, and you and I have had our fair share of hard conversations together. And one thing I appreciate about us, and one of the things I think people can see is, um, our friendship has that ability to feel like we don't, it doesn't change who we are about each other, the friendship and the
Right.
love that we have for each other. And so I just think, man, if people can understand that can happen with them, if they just let God give them the chance, if they just let God really
Amen.
take over, And so it's just been something I've been thinking through, and I've had some questions today from some people. And so, yeah, so it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
That's
right
good.
on, Brett.
All right,
Well,
man. Well,
you're tired, Chris, now. And so, well,
yeah. I mean, it's getting pretty close to bedtime.
I was,
And
Sunday morning.
I got one of those all I got one of those all one of those all day meetings tomorrow.
That's exciting. Yes.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, you muted it after.
Oh, I muted it after I coughed.
Yeah, you're like,
Well, I didn't get my timing just right. Yeah,
yeah, it
I got an
happens.
all day meeting tomorrow. Ugh.
Well, that's exciting.
You know, Miles, somebody said that no one will waste your time like a bunch of.
Like a
Well, I
bunch of
probably shouldn't say
meetings.
that.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't. You probably
I
shouldn't.
probably shouldn't say that. Yeah, it's
Well,
not
Miles,
vulgar. It would just
I was just
some
kidding.
people would hear it and think it was unkind. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, on
So.
that note, before Chris gets himself in some serious trouble, no, we're just kidding. One thing we tell you is, hey, even in the hard conversations, remember to pray, seek God, and He will help you and give you the answers. Gives you the Spirit for a
Amen.
reason. So,
Yep.
as always, I appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for letting me
Appreciate you,
come
buddy.
down and all that good
Had a great
stuff.
time.
Yep, your church is really fun, and I had crawfish, so always good.
That's right. Yeah.
All right,
Good
we'll see
weekend.
y'all next week. Yep.
All right. See ya.